Welcome to the Board Perspectives podcast, brought to you by Protiviti, a global consulting firm where we explore numerous challenges and areas of interest for boards of directors around the world. I am Alyse Mauro, and I help lead the ESG and sustainability practice at Protiviti. I'm joined today by two Protiviti colleagues, Livingston and Mark Carson. Livingston is a managing director in our technology consulting practice. Christine is responsible for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and innovation solutions at Protiviti. With over a decade of experience in artificial intelligence and machine learning deployment, Christine has delivered hundreds of successful AI solutions, including many first-in-class AI-enabled applications. Mark Carson leads Protiviti's data and analytics strategy practice and is the America's lead for ESG data and tooling, leveraging a culmination of experiences from over 20 years of delivering business value through the design, build, deployment, change management, and operations of innovative data and analytics solutions. Today, we're going to discuss artificial intelligence, otherwise known as AI, and how it can be used in sustainability, what it is, some examples of use cases, and where you can leverage AI to identify opportunities and risk. Christine and Mark are joining us today in their personal capacity to share their experience, expertise, and insights with us. Christine and Mark, welcome to Protiviti's Board Perspectives podcast series. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us, Alyse.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good to see you again.
So Christine, if it's okay with you, I'd love to jump right in with a first question that I'm sure is on all of our audience members' minds. The topic of AI has been never more popular, right? It's the topic of almost every conversation that we're in, particularly with all the press related to generative AI, like ChatGPT. AI capabilities are so much more than just generative AI. So can you spend some time grounding us on AI's capabilities, helping define it for the audience today?
Sure. It's one of my favorite questions, Alyse. And I always like to remind people that AI has been around for a long time. You may remember a big moment of awareness in 2011 when IBM Watson played on Jeopardy and actually beat Ken Jennings, right? The long-running champion. Think about how long ago that was. That's 13 years ago at this point. And really public example of artificial intelligence and its ability at that time to interpret and understand natural language questions and search for a relevant answer in a large body of information. And a lot of those capabilities still exist today. So artificial intelligence really broadly is an entire field of capabilities that can simulate human thought processes and human decision making. So you may see that come across through things like natural language processing, or again, this ability to understand unstructured information or the way that you and I communicate. And the way that you and I communicate, as we are right now, right, is sentences and paragraphs back and forth. We might send emails of information. Computers tend to think in zeros and ones, again, if you think very basic. And natural language processing is a core capability of AI focused on translating the way you and I speak in long form to a more translatable data set for algorithms to understand and interpret. It's also doing things like predictive analytics, so demand forecasting, supply chain planning, risk identification, fraud identification. Those things have been around for a very long time. And of course, the latest and greatest advancement in artificial intelligence has been the advent of generative AI, which is really an ability to create something new and novel. So it's not a predetermined output. It's actually creating something new based on the learning of that topic area that it's performed to date. And as you've seen now, right, this can be text, it can be video, it can be images, it can even be audio. And generative AI is really changing the way that we've thought about the field of artificial intelligence. AI historically has not been very good at creating, and now we're actually seeing AI start to get into the domain and the era of creation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christine. So you said learning a couple of times in helping define what AI is, and the learning of a machine to have human thought process. Where does the human fall into this learning mechanism when it comes to AI and generative AI?
There's a couple ways, right? So one way up front is humans can actually help and teach artificial intelligence. And that can be in a couple of different ways. That can be in providing information for an algorithm or AI to interpret. And again, in a very simple example, maybe it's providing an image and saying, this is an image of a cat and this is an image of a dog. And you're distinguishing for the model and the algorithm which is which. It could also be in evaluating the output, right? So in the case of a generative AI application, it could be, yes, you got that right. No, you got that wrong type of information. That's actually a picture of a dinosaur, not a picture of a cat, right? And it's really a couple of different ways that humans actually help to teach AI, and they teach it how to learn. The other role of humans and AI, and we may talk about this later as well, but is to really work more efficiently and more effectively augmented with AI. So how can we then use this AI that's been developed to help us do things more efficiently and more effectively, and use AI to accelerate our human processes?
Thank you so much, Christine. So we've defined what AI is. We've talked about where the human element fits in. Let's talk about a little bit about some fears around AI. So false evidence appearing real, or maybe misconceptions when it comes to AI. What's a common one that you hear often?
Well, I think probably one of the most common fears that exists with AI is human replacement, right? So that we will be replaced by machines and the workforce will dramatically change. And the workforce will change. But I love this perspective from Jed Kolko, who said it's always easier to imagine the jobs that exist today and might be destroyed than it is to imagine the jobs that don't exist today and might be created. And I think there's so much truth and wisdom in that it's much easier for us to see today what is going away and what is changing than being able to forecast what's coming. And as we've developed and deployed AI applications and now Gen AI applications, we've seen that a lot of that fear of replacement is often not founded or grounded in reality. And you actually create new jobs and new opportunities, again, for people to focus on the more complex, higher level tasks. And we just talked about how humans help AI learn. Just like you might have a human employee that you need to monitor their performance and you need to provide feedback, and occasionally you need to retrain, you also need to evaluate the performance of your AI models, and you need to give them feedback and you need to retrain them. So I've also seen jobs created that are the AI monitors or the AI trainers, and who are really focused on how do we ensure that our AI is continuing to function as we intended it to, and that it is, again, continuing to perform against new information and new data. A great example of this is think if you would have asked AI what CarPlay was 7 years ago, it didn't exist. It would have had no framework, no form of reference to even answer that question. Or if you asked AI about ChatGPT 2 years ago, again, would have had no frame of reference. And so there's always this continual training process to inform your AI about the real world around you and teach it how to interpret new information as well.
That is extremely helpful. The truth and wisdom behind that, right? The performance continuously being evaluated. Like a human, the machine is only going to be as smart as we enable it to be. That's just a beautiful sentiment. Thanks for sharing that with us, Christine. Mark, we're going to dive into some ESG use cases. So for audience members, ESG, environmental social governance, and talk about some of the AI capabilities that can be enabled through the ESG and sustainability lens.
Absolutely. And we'll probably dive a little deeper into some of these later, but just to talk a little bit about some themes of use cases, there's a lot of opportunity here within ESG to leverage all the different versions of AI, as Christine talked about. Everything from being able to go use natural language processing to look at unstructured sources of information like a utility bill, like somebody else's sustainability report, etc., and pull the salient information out of that source that you'll need for your own reporting. So that's a classic natural language processing need. Another version might be your ability to set effective targets as an organization, right? There's a lot of research that can go into what your peers are doing in their target setting, what the realities of your current footprint, let's say from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective, what your current footprint is very unique and can be very unique versus your peers and others. So how do you baseline? Well, there's a lot of information to bring together to come up with points of view on that. And artificial intelligence can help you collect that information and look for signals within that information that might help you be able to set targets. Another one, really working on the more front end, generative side of AI, is around the storytelling and being able to actually draft content for you to submit into your reports. Now, obviously, checks and balances, and you should treat generative AI as a draft, right, for you to evaluate and derive from. But it can be very helpful because it can make observations a lot of times that maybe you're not seeing because you don't think at the millions of permutations the AI model can think of when it's looking at data. And I might come up with some interesting nuggets for you to add to your storytelling. Then you can get into things like actually meeting your targets, like driving down greenhouse gas emissions. For example, one of my clients is using visual AI to go out and actually fly drones over their solar farms and look for cracks in solar panels. And be able to come out and proactively either fix those or proactively repair something that's about to break. So there's things like that where you can actually use AI to help you become more sustainable as well. So lots of different angles here. The biggest one, and we'll dive into it more, no doubt, is around data management. And just the fact that right now it's so darn hard to collect a lot of this data and make estimates on this data, actually standardize this information so that you can tell a consistent story. Artificial intelligence is very good at ingesting, standardizing, aggregating, and bringing information together, and even making suggestions on observations from that data set.
Thank you, Mark. It sounds like there's a lot of really good use cases here. Specifically, you mentioned data management, storytelling, target setting. And so, Christine, I'd love to hear from you about how companies, how enterprises are using AI specifically within their organizations in these use cases. There's going to be risk and opportunities. So when you think about AI from an opportunity and a risk perspective and the symbiotic importance of both, can you help just define that a little bit further of how boards and companies can be thinking about the risks and opportunities within specific use cases or just at large?
Yeah, well, I actually think it's really important to be thinking about the opportunity and risk of specific use cases intentionally. And when you think about the opportunity and the risk, it's no secret that AI is here and it's here to stay, and it's making a transformative impact in companies everywhere. There were studies done throughout 2023 that indicated that people who used generative AI capabilities were 40% more efficient than their peers who didn't. There are also some statistics and studies that say that for every $1 a company invested in AI, they realized an average of $3.5 in return. So clearly no one can complain about a 350% ROI or a 40% efficiency gain. And what that means is now is the time to invest in this, to learn, and to deploy meaningful applications so you're not left behind. You need to do so very responsibly. There are very real and unique risks that exist with generative AI in particular, such as hallucinations, probably one of the most talked about, most well understood risks or concerns of generative AI specifically. And this is really the generation of text or information that is erroneous or nonsensical or entirely detached from reality. We've seen some really big examples of people who relied on a response from a generative AI model without properly fact checking its information and realized that the very confident answers that they received back were very wrong. They were factually incorrect, but again, very compelling and very confident in their responses. And so, as you start to think about hallucination, privacy, and security, is another very real concern and risk with artificial intelligence. And it's important to understand how you're going to think about, again, the opportunity that you can't be left behind on, but adequate governance and risk management so that you're using this technology ethically, responsibly, and in a way that's going to produce meaningful results with human in the loop. And we've found that Gen AI, more than its predecessors in some earlier AI technologies, has really required a cross-functional team to look at both that opportunity and that risk together to understand both why you would and why you should and how you could do something. And that it's really important for boards to stress the importance of experimenting with this technology and recognizing that it is here and it is real, but also encouraging responsibility and accountability in their key leadership to ensure that it's done so very, again, responsibly and ethically.
Thank you so much, Christine. Some of the key words that I heard there was experimenting. So essentially test before you go live, right? Before those impacts actually hit the business, understand where those impacts may reside, and then try and mitigate those around the holistic governance over your AI and data and analytics practice within your organization at large. Is that a fair governance way to go about things?
Absolutely. Very well stated.
Yeah, and I'd take it one step further maybe, and it's test and retest, right? And consistently test, because there is the technical terms called model drift. But, if you have enough people, a silly example is, you train a model that 1 + 1 = 2. If you have enough people attack that model and say, well, actually 1 + 1 = 6, eventually that model can start thinking, you know what? The world has changed. 1 + 1 may not equal 2 anymore. That's a silly, simple example, but it's things like that you have to consistently test for to make sure that your models are staying within the accurate and ethical and private, right? Those things need to be consistently tested for.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for that. And I know you mentioned data management earlier. Mm-hmm. So this topic has presented itself as a real challenge for boards and customers and clients. How can AI specifically support enabling better data management?
Sure. Let me define data management quickly. When I think about data management, I think about the aspect of understanding what information that you need to provide to investors, shareholders, insurance companies around any topic, but today it's ESG, right? And really understanding the stories you need to tell. And then data management is about from sourcing all the way through to delivery of that information. So it's the life cycle of bringing that information together, storing it securely, checking it for privacy, feeding it to the models, making sure the models remain accurate, complete, and ethical and secure, and then subsequently delivering that information. So think about it across the entire life cycle is how I would define data management. And AI can be used significantly across the whole thing, from data collection, like I talked about around flying over solar arrays and looking for cracks, right? That's data collection essentially, right? To actually bringing the data in and applying algorithms to it to say, this data is coming in parts per million, this data came in another unit of measure, et cetera. Let's just automatically bring all that together and standardize it onto one, unit of measure. AI could support doing that. AI can look at anomalies and say, you know what, you probably meant your company was 70,000 people, not 700 million people, right? So it can look for anomalies in the data to say, you know what, this doesn't smell right. All the way to the other end of actually being able to then look at this large data and look for signals within that data around maybe certain relationships within the data that you may not have seen. An example like ice cream sales go up every time the temperature goes up, right? I mean, it's a silly example, but relationships like that you might not have been spotting in your data, and it can make suggestions to you. So you can really use it along the entire spectrum. But right now, using it to make sense of data, standardized data on the sourcing side seems to be especially where people are interested in leveraging AI right now, because this data is coming in on backs of napkins. Like, it's coming in from everywhere right now because it's a relatively immature discussion. The other example, let me give you quickly for another level of detail from a board perspective, is around reducing risk. Let's move it out of the environment side and move it to more of the social side. So wringing forced labor and child labor out of your supply chains. There's a lot of different angles at which you can analyze that information. One of which may be just customer service calls and internal HR calls, right, that are taking place within these companies. And you've probably dialed in before and heard, a robot tell you this call may be recorded and monitored for quality. Well, in the past, you had humans listening to a statistically significant number of calls to see if they could glean any information from that call that could make their customer service better, what have you. Well, AI could listen to every single call and parse every single word and actually evaluate for sentiment. Does the person dialing in sound young? Don't trust it, but do they sound young? Does this person calling in sound nervous? Right? There's all kinds of different things that AI can do, and it could listen to every single call, legally and ethically, of course. So there's just a lot of power there in AI to help you dig that much deeper into some of the challenges you're trying to remediate.
Thanks so much, Mark. And so thinking about now, Christine, in the ESG context, in the ESG lens, how do you see AI assisting in customizing ESG reports, data, disclosures for different stakeholders? So some stakeholders could, examples could be investors, customers, board members, and even regulatory bodies.
Well, this is a great use case of generative AI specifically. So all of those stakeholders you just mentioned are all looking for information out of the same data. They just want to slice and dice it and visualize it a little bit differently. One investor might want to see everything in red. One might want to see everything in green. One might care a little bit more about a specific font or highlighting certain visuals more than another. And generative AI is able to support the transformation of that same information in many different formats at scale. Think hyper personalization of all of these reports and templates and visualizations, as it's able to, again, as Mark said, AI can listen to every single call. AI can now generate every single format and visual that you'd like, give it the right prompt and the right information, and it's able to very quickly generate that output. Again, needs to be reviewed and confirmed for accuracy, but the ability of AI and Gen AI specifically to create truly personalized content is going to reach a scale we've never seen before. So you can highlight for each individual, each stakeholder group, or each corporation the data that they care about the most. And AI is able to do that all at almost immediate scale.
Fantastic to hear. A lot of sustainability leaders at companies have very small teams. So the thought of having to do the same slice or different cuts of data for 4 different stakeholder groups is extremely time consuming. So being able to leverage technology to communicate what needs to be communicated to the different stakeholders is a huge value add. And any sustainability leader is going to be music to their ears, right? The ability to do that with the right governance, of course, and legally and ethically is going to be very important. But that consistency of information and communication to the different stakeholder groups with a trusted set of data. That's exciting to hear. And I really hope that this continues to see traction and transformation within the sustainability space specifically. Let's talk about the future. I know none of us have a crystal ball, but there's certainly ways that AI can be used to predict future ESG challenges, opportunities, and risks based on historical and current trends.
Well, you know what? I'm going to leave the future talk a little bit for Christine, I think. And let me just kind of circle back on where I think this is going to become that much more useful from a pragmatic standpoint is, a lot of these use cases that Christina and I have talked about and capabilities, they're going to become that much more user friendly. Like for those of you on the call that might remember the beginnings of email, you might remember some of you had to log into like servers with command line prompts and all kinds of stuff if you're a Gen Xer like myself. And then all of a sudden nowadays, right, you have, the computer reads your face and then your email's there, right? The same thing's going to happen when it comes to leveraging AI specifically for ESG related use cases. It's going to start being more and more embedded into products to where then you'll be able to, like to use the example Christine said around customizing fonts and just presentation methods, right? It won't be long before you'll be able to spit out your kind of final draft report. And then you'll be able to speak to that draft and say, change this, change that, and it will change it for you. And it'll all be part of your ESG reporting tools, for example, right? So it won't be add on this, bolt on that. It's going to become that much easier for the layperson to use.
Yeah, it's almost like thinking about anything unfamiliar is uncomfortable. So the more we talk about it, the more we use it, the more we experiment, it becomes more normal. Email and the internet was this brand new thing that people had no idea how it worked. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know what it meant, right? And now you don't even think twice about leveraging email and sending emails. And I'm sure everybody can probably attest to that, given the number of emails that maybe have popped up as you are listening to this podcast alone. So with innovation, it creates that connection point, that communication, that access to information faster, with more reliability, hopefully, and then also that distribution of information.
It's going to be a lot easier to use, right? The layperson will have access to these tools where you don't have to be someone who focuses on this for a living to actually use the products. So right now, I think all these things that we've talked about now, they're not wholesale easily adoptable. So they're going to get that much easier to use.
It's a great point, Mark. And I think the user experience is extremely important in this context. Thank you so much for making that point. Christine, putting on your into the future thinking hat on, what are some challenges and opportunities and also risks in this area that maybe people should be thinking about in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, just using the knowledge that you have and that historical and current trend element of AI?
I think you'll see innovation accelerate like it never has before. The pace at which we're moving and creating more and more capable models has really accelerated exponentially, even over the last couple of years. And so I think you'll see that pace of change continue to increase, which is sometimes hard to believe because it feels like it's changing on a second by second basis. But I think we'll continue to see that trajectory for quite a while with the Gen AI space, as it really is new in the technology world. I think you're also going to see a lot of really interesting things happen around data collection practices, privacy practices. There's a lot happening in courts right now, a lot of regulation around AI. I think we'll see a lot of things develop over the next 12 months, really around how information can be collected and used. And when I think more on the opportunity side, I think you're going to have a really interesting ability. Mark hinted at some of it, but to think really multimodal and to engage with information in a way we never have before. So think, if I'm looking at my water usage, do I even need a dashboard anymore? Or do I just walk over to my water meter and say, send me a report telling me how your usage compares over the last year? Can I actually ask things, tell me what's wrong with you? Why are you broken? How can I fix you? Those types of questions and engagements, I think, become very feasible and very plausible in the near future. If you think, again, what sometimes I think we thought the promise of Alexa or Siri technologies was that that's going to start to be realized, right? Could you actually say, Alexa, generate my ESG report for 2023? Possibly, right? And I think you'll see a lot of really interesting, innovations and this technology being applied in ways that we never even thought it could be.
That sounds like magic. Being able to ask Alexa that question and even just seeing that, like Mark said, that first draft, that first output, in order for the innovation to continue, we need to be leaning in and leveraging these technologies, experimenting with them, and getting curious about this, from every business, every industry perspective. Mark, to close out our conversation today, what are 3 key takeaways you want our audience to remember as they leave this conversation today?
I think number 1 is the horse has left the barn, right? AI is here to stay. It's only going to get more sophisticated, and it's really going to be up to all of us, right, to ensure that it is doing more good than harm, right? It's definitely going to have ramifications on both sides, as any major innovation does, right? So it's really going to be up to all of us to look after it. Perhaps that's probably 2 wrapped into one. Number 1 is it's here and it's not going away. Number 2 is it's up to all of us. It's going to take a community, right, to make sure that we keep this thing going in the right direction. And I'd say number 3 is, the old adage of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Well, we're at that point with understanding AI and appreciating it and building the foundations within your organization to enable it. Because, you've heard it 100 times, but I'll say it 101, is a company and or an employee, right, is not going to go under or lose their job because of AI. Likely they're going to go under or lose their job by someone who has embraced AI, by a company who has embraced AI. So that'd probably be my big 3.
Thank you so much, Mark. So some of the key words I heard here today from both Christine and Mark: embrace it. Take AI into your organizations, get curious, understand it, learn more. Continuous education, continuous performance evaluation, test, and then also retest, experiment, invest in order to see those returns. And then Christine and Mark both said, it's no secret. AI is here and it's here to stay. So let's do this as a community. Let's do it as a practice. Share knowledge as often as you can. And I want to thank both Mark and Christine for being here today. And thank you to all of our listeners for being loyal listeners. We hope you enjoyed our conversation today about AI and ESG, what it is, how it could help with your business needs, and how to identify and navigate opportunities and risk. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at Protiviti. Until next time, take good care.